Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at the greenhouse effect, how invisible habits become visible character. Let's just jump right in. I want to completely immerse you in a concept that is going to flip how you view your own character. We usually think of character as this big thing we actively perform, right? Like making a dramatic, brave choice in a high-pressure moment. But what if it's not? What if character is actually something you absorb, completely silently, every single day, without even realizing it? Okay, let's dive into this. There's this brilliantly simple quote from Rachel Cruz: "More is caught than taught." Now, sure, it sounds like parenting advice, and honestly, it is. But it's also a foundational truth about how human formation works at every single stage of your life. You don't transfer your values or your character primarily just by giving instructions. You transfer them by simply being. What you are just kind of radiates outward, and the people around you soak it up, literally the exact same way clothing absorbs the air in a room. Character isn't performed, it's radiated. To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at a powerful metaphor from coach Tony Dungy. He calls it the greenhouse. Imagine you walk into an actual, physical greenhouse that's just absolutely packed with orchids, gardenias, and roses. The air is incredibly thick with their scent. Well, even if you only hang out there for a few minutes, when you step back outside, you carry that greenhouse with you. People in other rooms know exactly where you've been. Not because you announced it, but because the scent is still right there on your clothes. That's exactly what your daily environment does to you. The books you read, the community you surround yourself with, the little daily practices you maintain, that right there, that's your greenhouse. And the terrifying but honestly beautiful truth is that you carry its fragrance into literally every room you walk into. Section 1. When habits translate. Let's move to and see how this builds. We're going to transition sharply here. Let's step out of that quiet, metaphorical greenhouse and jump right into a loud, incredibly high-stakes athletic arena, just to prove that this concept isn't just nice theory. It works everywhere. Picture this. It's the NBA playoffs. The New York Knicks are playing on the road in Cleveland. They're down by more than 20 points. The building is literally shaking with crowd noise. The cameras, they've already written the Knicks off. But then, the Knicks just kept defending. They kept moving the ball, they slowly erased the deficit, and actually won the game. Afterward, Knicks captain Jalen Brunson didn't talk about digging deep to find some magical grit in the moment. He just said two words: habits translate. That's it. They didn't magically discover toughness out there on the court. They just relied on the greenhouse they had already built. Let's break down exactly how this timeline actually plays out. Sports executive George Reveling noticed something super profound about this dynamic. He said that what you've been doing in the dark ultimately shows up under the lights. Think about the months and weeks of totally unseen, rep-by-rep preparation. The Knicks didn't just suddenly figure out how to trust each other under heavy fire on game day. The game just revealed what was already there. Reveling puts it perfectly. Potential is just a prediction, but habits are evidence. Potential only tells you what someone might become, but the habits you build in the dark, those tell you what you actually are. Section 2. You are what you accumulate. So we've seen this play out in high-stakes sports, but let's pivot for a second to the philosophical proofs of this concept. Because honestly, this cross-domain validation is what makes this explainer so fascinating to me. The rules of human character simply don't change just because the setting does. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the great novelist Leo Tolstoy brilliantly frames this invisible formation. He basically argues that we have to deliberately choose whose servant we're going to be. If you're the servant of your passions, that's the left side here. You're endlessly chasing something outside yourself, right? Like approval, comparison, or some kind of external fulfillment. But if you serve an inner divine spirit or truth, over on the right side, your master is internal. It's constant. The takeaway for us is pretty stark. You're always being formed by something. You've got to deliberately choose your master, or I can promise you you're going to inherit one by default. And this brings us to a really brilliant convergence of thought. About 2,000 years ago, Jesus famously said, "By their fruits ye shall know them." Basically, a tree doesn't just sit there and magically choose its fruit in the moment. It bears exactly what years of soil and root development dictate. We actually see a super similar thread from pragmatist philosopher Richard Rorty, who comes from a completely different tradition. He says there is nothing deep down inside us except what we have put there ourselves. Think about that for a second. There is no pre-existing hidden self waiting to pop out and save the day when you're under pressure. There's only what you've accumulated over time. The greenhouse isn't optional, folks. You are always soaking in something. Section 3, tending your inner greenhouse. So if we're entirely the product of our inner greenhouse, how in the world do we maintain it? Let's shift the narrative to the practical infrastructure of giving. We really need to talk about the shadow side of this whole concept, just to ground this advice and completely avoid the trap of toxic positivity. Author Ryan Holiday points out a really subtle but super dangerous distortion in our high achievement culture. This weird idea that suffering through depletion is somehow a virtue. Well, it's not. As author Schopenhauer observed, the greatest of follies is to sacrifice health for any other kind of happiness. It goes back to the metaphor. You cannot radiate a fragrance you haven't absorbed. The parent, the leader, the coach who completely depletes their inner reserves in the name of service, they aren't being selfless. They're actually being strategically reckless. And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world impact of that choice. Mental wealth is a highly perishable asset. Things like taking time for therapy, resting, or just sitting down to read a good book, those are not self-indulgences. They are the absolute required infrastructure for sustained giving. On the flip side, if you choose the strategy of depletion, the result is just parched soil. You're basically spending your principal without doing any maintenance on the asset itself. Tending your inner greenhouse is an absolute non-negotiable mechanism if you want to succeed. Section 4. From deliberation to action. But hey, this is where I need to issue a bit of a warning. There is a massive trap embedded in all this wisdom about character formation, and it's something high performers fall into all the time. It's getting so caught up in the theory of character formation that you never actually take a real step forward. The philosopher Anthony de Mello tells this quick little parable about disciples who deliberate endlessly about which path to take. The master just watches them and drops this profound truth. People who deliberate fully before taking a step will spend their lives on one leg. You know, you can sit around theorizing about the greenhouse forever. You can analyze Tolstoy and Ravelin and ponder your own mental wealth all day long. But if you don't actually get up and walk through the door of the greenhouse, it's just intellectual avoidance. Standing on one leg isn't a position, it's paralysis. So, to break out of that paralysis, we can apply Bruce Lee's legendary framework for action. Step 1, absorb what is useful from what we've talked about today. Step 2, discard what is not serving your specific environment. And step 3, add what is uniquely your own. This is a call to active synthesis. Please don't just passively contemplate what your habits are right now. Actively shape them into motion today. Remember, Jalen Brunson's habits translated because he actually stepped onto the practice court every day, not because he just understood the theory. So the crucial point comes down to this. Les Brown tells us winning is a curriculum. It's something you learn. It's not just magically gifted to you. Simon Sinek reminds us that leaders have to care first, simply because their people are going to catch their character way before they catch their instructions. And notice what is wonderfully absent from this entire explainer so far. Talent. Talent is not the primary variable here. What matters most is your consistency in the dark. And honestly, the most encouraging news of all is that the right greenhouse is available to you every single day. You just have to show up. So I'll leave you with this. Whose servant are you today? And what greenhouse are you currently sitting in? Remember, you don't actually get to choose whether you're being formed. You are absorbing something right at this very second. You only get to choose the direction. The fragrance that clings to your clothing when you leave the room, it's not an accident. It is the accumulated consequence of the environments you choose during those ordinary hours when absolutely no one is grading you. So take a moment for some self-reflection today. Choose your greenhouse deliberately, and then take the step. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.